Hey guys, Casal here. You're about to watch Thorin talk and talk and talk. But it's kind of good, I swear.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be karrigan from FaZe Clan, who is a return guest. But obviously, we did the last interview a long time ago. I think you might even have still been in Astralis at the time. It might even be like the latter. I think it was maybe like 2016 or something. I'm pretty sure it was around that time period. So it's been a while. I've got a lot to catch up on. So what I thought we'd do is, even though if people go and watch that interview, obviously that'll be way more in depth of those early years, and this was way earlier in CSGO. I do like later on, it is called Reflections, just to find out how like people's perception changes. So one thing I did want to ask you is, I think a lot of people are really unaware of something, karrigan, which is they don't seem to get that. Like, I know people have heard that thing of like, he was an AWPer in 1.6, but it's like, what they don't get is like, that first year in TSM when he had some really good results was basically like the first proper year of being an IGL. And actually, you kind of hit the ground running. But the most famous thing, and I think this did actually like almost haunt you until recently when you won the major, the Grand Slam, and all the big accomplishments that make all the narratives change. There was the whole thing, obviously, where like, it's funny because Heroic has this now, where it's like, they can beat anyone, and they can even be number one, as long as it isn't like the biggest event in the semis of the final. Like, everyone's seen it. Like, they can win the same tournament against the same teams, and that's what TSM was like. TSM could beat any team. In fact, the famous thing is, in the FNATIC era, you guys were just beating FNATIC all the time. The problem is, you go to the major, you're in the semi, you're in the arena. It's not even that people always trust, it's just something always goes wrong. And also, you're playing the greatest teams of all time. What do you think when you think back on TSM in 2015? Like, do you have a harsh perception of it? Do you actually, can you remember the good times? Was it actually a great year, even though there were failures? What do you think of that time period?
I think it was a great year because I think that was the first time we really put Denmark on the map for winning tournaments. If you have to go back to 1.6 NTW, who was a big team back then, but when I joined TSM, their biggest problem was they never won a tournament, right? Even if they played good in other tournaments, they would still not finish it off, you know. So coming to TSM, I knew it was a big task, playing with the best players in Denmark. But we managed to win suddenly. I think we had a short run with like within 4 or 5 months, we beat FNATIC, we beat Funny LDLC, we had problems with and started winning tournaments. I think when I look back, it was still a very young team. With people who had to find themselves, find the right roles, have the right mentality. And I think when I look back 5-6 years ago, CSGO was not as hard as it is today. Like, the mentality of players, the way people play, the practice good, everything is different now. And I think what happened was they obviously won majors right after I left, and I'm happy for them and everything went on. But I also think they matured a lot, having a sports psychologist who came in and could give that last 5% in the big tournaments, right? So yeah, it's always hard to hear that sometimes people think I was the only main reason.
You were the problem or whatever.
but in the beginning, I helped them also win tournaments, right? So they knew at that point they could win tournaments. When I came in, they didn't know if they could win tournaments, right? They had a taste of winning tournaments, and I think at that point, when you start winning, the same with when Cloud9 won the first LAN tournament, I got scared because Cloud9 was so good online. So when they finally won Dallas against us in the quarterfinal, I was like, okay, now they know how it is to win, and now it's easier to replicate than having a situation where you never won. And that's what we went through in TSM. So yeah, I look at it as good times, learning curve for myself, and also a big learning curve for those when they were a little younger and now they're more mature players.
Right, obviously that was 8 years ago, so like that could be like two people's whole careers in CS at that point in time. So who was karrigan the caller back then? Because one thing I think people actually have a bit misunderstood was, to me, it was more like FaZe and then later teams where you have the big names where it was this looser style. Like, there was more structure in TSM, right?
I think so. I mean, the meta changes every year, and I think I tried to show in my career, whatever meta it is, I might not win, I would always be competitive in the way I see the game. But it was more structured. It was easier to communicate. It was easier to call also because the communication was way more cleaner and the culture difference was not there. How people see the game might be a little different, but we can always come to a situation because we have the same culture. We know how to work. Generally, how you grow up as a Danish player and as a Danish person, right? So I think that was way easier to kind of talk about that. I think CSGO back then was not competitive as it's today. I changed as a person, I changed as a caller, I tried to follow the meta, I always tried to improve. So I think I wasn't a great caller back then. But I think that's what makes this so interesting, that you can grow and you can learn from failures, and you can learn from wins. And I think I learned a lot back then, and I learned a lot in Astralis as well, how I handle stuff as a person. So yeah, I think for me it was a great experience, and it was like that was the time I thought about quitting, like right before TSM gave me an offer, and suddenly I found out, okay, I can actually become a good caller if I really want to. So I studied the game in a different way than I used to when I was a star player, for example.
Right, obviously back then you had Device and he was one of the stars of the game, but famously I've always told this story that when there was this era and I talked to him and I told him like this whole thing of like whatever psychological block you've got, if you're having a bit pressure under big games, you've got to like do things, look into sport psychology, read books, like figure out some way, right? He would always tell me back then, I mean, it wasn't wrong. It's like, yeah, but I'm not supposed to just be, I'm not the reason we have to win or lose. Like back then, you had like the trio, you had KGB, you had Dupree, people don't know, these are other very good players in their roles, right? Even though he said that back then, obviously since then when he went on to the Astralis with Glaive, I mean, until we had this online stuff where they added all the online MVP, the guy had the most MVPs ever. He won like 17 or something absurd. So he won a couple back when he played with you. What would you say Device was like back then, and what development have you seen later on when you're battling against him and seeing him in these majors?
I think obviously he found himself in what role. I think the funniest thing about TSM, we had 3 different orbs on 3 different maps because not everyone in the team was fully comfortable playing main orb. So obviously it's also way easier to, when you're a hybrid, to not have the full responsibility. Nowadays we all know if you have the orb, you have to have impact. You have to be the star player. There will be a round of 13-13 where you have an orb and a pistols, and that's the round you need to shine. You have the most expensive in the game in the gun, and you need to be able to take your team on the back sometimes. So I think the mentality of Device obviously changed as a person, as a player. We all grew up, and that's what I've tried to reflect on before. Like, we were not mature, and I think whoever you ask 8-9 years ago, they were not mature in the way they saw the game and the way they played. It was more little relaxed. It was passion about the game. Now it's very different. You have a lot of analysts behind you, coaches. You have a lot of ways to review demos. And back then, I reviewed the stream, like basically when in a tournament.
Right.
Nowadays we have programs to do it, so it was a lot more relaxed. And now it's different. If you want to be at the top, it's a constant battle. Back then, I always felt like there was no big upsets in tournaments. If you're a top 10 team,
true.
You would make it to playoff. Look at the major in Paris. Like, even if you're top 8, you don't guarantee anything. We almost didn't make it, right? So I think back then the level between Tier 1 and Tier 2 was so big difference that even if you had a bad day, you would go to the playoff. And when we came to the playoff, it was 50-50 often in those games. So I think just everything became more professional, and I think also people matured, and now we see sport psychologists working with 17-year-old kids who probably haven't ever played a sport in their life, in real life sports. So they are learning from a lot from the first step, and we all have to learn it our own way, and studying the game, studying ourselves, and try to improve as a team. So there's a big difference from back then to today. I feel like so hard to compare, actually.
When people don't win the big one or the major, I notice fans have this really simplistic way of viewing it, which seems counterintuitive to me, which is they always think the person who wins is way up here and the guy who comes second and doesn't is like way down here. And, he could never have won and this other guy was always going to win. But I always think of it this way. It's like if someone keeps getting in position over and over and over again, you got to be in a good team. You got to be good enough to get to the point to choke in a game. So the question I have is this, like I said, even though 2015 was FNATIC's time, you have a pretty cool piece of trivia, which is you actually beat them the majority of times you played that FNATIC team, the legendary one with Olaf and Crims and Flusher and all that, all the great players we remember, all the amazing defaulty type, just that Swedish Counter-Strike, isn't it? Like, what do you think? Why did you match up so specifically well against this team, do you think?
I think it was funny. I think they had a very, very loose style, right? They played a lot, and I think my style back then was very explosive compared to playing too slow or playing too fast. We balanced a lot, and I think that created some good situations where we were also a good team, good players. So if we went into a side that didn't gamble much, we knew, okay, if we trade good, I think we have possibilities to play. as they were really good at clutches as well. But I think player for player, the way we saw the game was a direct counter to FNATIC. But the funny thing, we could not beat the LDLC. So there was for
Yes.
6 months there was a trio or top 3 teams, and it all depended on the bracket. FNATIC wanted to meet LDLC,
Yes.
LDLC wanted to meet us, and we wanted to meet FNATIC. So it was very funny, and I think that's what made Counter-Strike perfect and awesome. Is just basically there will be some matchups that's not funny, and it's like our matchup against BNE. Like it is a chaos on steroid, and we are a chaotic team. We like chaotic rounds and chaos, but they are creating a lot more than we are used to, and that's really hard for us to react and play against. So I just think also the play style and the way we acted, and I think maybe in that period of time was where, okay, the 2 teams we have hard times was LDLC and FNATIC. They were above us, so I think we were able to play with less pressure. But obviously at the majors was a little bit different, where the pressure automatically in any game would be high, right? Because of the major spec then was way bigger than any other tournament we have today.
Sure.
So like Cologne and Katowice is for many players still a major in that sense. There's so much prestige and history, right? And back then it was only the majors, and maybe.
Oh, the joke is they were the majors back then.
yeah, even that, right? So I think there was just a lot of pressure. But when we played them in different tournaments, we obviously did good, and I have no idea why and how. It's just like, if I reflect on it, I just feel like the play style fit us, and against LDLC it didn't fit us.
One thing I think is quite interesting that shows you, just by how I'm going to ask this question, that you've entered a different tier of in-game leader, is normally if someone wins some tournaments and has some seconds and some top 4s, what you're supposed to do is, right, we'll focus on the wins, like, oh, amazing, everything was great. The losses, like, oh, unlucky, could have won. And then on the semis, where it's like, oh, and he was still a top team, right? Here's how I'm going to ask this question about the FaZe Clan lineup, the super team with NiKo and Olaf and all those guys. It's going to be like this. Yeah, you won some titles, you won a few, you were in some finals, obviously the major final, really always top 4. But I remember actually talking to you even after the Boston major final when he was trying to do like the one last run with that lineup. And I remember you telling me what I think was perfect. You told me, I should win every tournament. I've got all the best players in the world. Like, I just got like Olaf Meister and Guardian. I've got NiKo and Ray. Like, you weren't the guy doing that angle of like, oh, unlucky some days, or like, should be. Essentially, if you look at that FaZe Clan lineup, like, you could have, and maybe you should have been your era, right? You should have won it all. You could have had the first Grand Slam. It could have really been for that FaZe Clan, right?
I think so. I mean, that was the thing when we assembled a team. I knew you're winning or you're not, like the pressure's high, but also try to back that, look at the pressure as a privilege, because we're able to playing with this team, collecting this team, and actually make it work as the first international team in Counter-Strike, where people have told me for years that it was not possible to win the big tournaments or having a long stand in the top 5 or top 3 with an international team. So this was the team to really get it going, right? I think we did good before Olaf and Guardian came in, but this was the first time where we actually could get players from another team. Because back then the joke was FaZe was a retirement home. I wasn't good enough for Astralis. Q wasn't good enough for LDLC. Rain had nowhere else in Norway, right? So I think we should have won more. I mean, obviously the team were killed after the Katowice final. Not even the Boston major. I mean, everybody can choke. Basically, that what happened. Like that's part of the ladder and the story we have to learn from. But the Katowice was a replicate of the major in a very, very rough, long game. I think it was 7-8 hours, and Flusher goes 40 kills on 5th map, right? So. And after that, obviously, something personal happened with Olaf, and that left the team in shambles. And once we got Olaf back, we expected it to be number 1, and that was the biggest mistake. Before, when we got the team, it was fine to expect to be number 1. The meta, there was no one sitting on the crown. But when Astralis was on the crown, we can't expect with 1 week of practice we have to win this tournament, and that's where the mentality failed in the team, and White fell off. From each other, but also playing with a stand-in for 4 months, even winning tournaments, but it's like a wound, and you don't know how to fix it at that point. So we should have won more. I mean, we should have won the major, big chance we won on Katowice as well. Like, who God knows what would happen if we won the Boston Major and actually win Katowice? That would have been insane results on 6-7 months, right? So, but also learned something as a person. As I think I'm better in-game leader today than I was back then, right? I know what I need to expect from a team. I know how to handle myself, and I can now say what I need from the team is what I couldn't back then. As the personalities in the team were big, there was not egos, but we expected to win every tournament, and it's easy to say back then, but obviously today you have to understand that the competition is getting tougher and tougher every day, and now if I had the team now, I think back, I would say, yeah, we have to be a top 3 team or be in every semifinal of every tournament, and if you win, we win, but you have to have some luck on your side sometimes.
One thing I remember, we did that Strapbook episode where we talked about this a little bit, which is I always felt like people misunderstood the fact that because this was an international team, they got blinded by the stars and they just thought like, yeah, well, it's obvious you should win, like if you had those players. But that was actually always the reason why if someone made one of those HLTV fan lineups, like, right, I'd have NiKo, Simple, and Divide. It's like, it wouldn't work though, would it? Because like, first of all, they're not even from the same region, same culture. Like they wouldn't even be able to sort of understand each other initially. So when you were trying this, I've always thought you've actually been trying to play a different game. Like to me, if people want to compare Glaive, compare him to Karrigan, like that MSL, they're playing the same game. They're playing with the Danish lineups. They're playing Danish CS. When you did this, one thing you made clear to me in that Strapbook episode is people look at like the fragging and who the players are. But one thing they didn't understand was the other reason why super teams are really hard is because it's a super team, the egos are super too. Like, this guy was the best player in his team. This guy was the primary AWPer in this team. This guy was like player of the year this year before. This guy thinks he's the best player now. Like, there's all your teammates. So if you've got those players as well, it's kind of like what you're saying. This is why I've always wondered, what if you'd won Boston Major, Katowice? Like, one of these wins could have totally changed sort of the team atmosphere, right? Because the other thing is, those players also expected to win every tournament. And if you know players, by the way, if they lose, maybe some of them are reflective enough to go, was the problem? Most of them are going to go, right, coach, now we don't have a coach, IGL, they just go through the list. It's like football, you fire the manager first, right? So This is a different game, right? I'm sure you even had a different experience from what TSM was like, even though they had very good players. Like, to manage the Galacticos, essentially, it's a different game, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, this was the first. Like, that's the funny thing is, from TSM, I kind of grew into the team. I earned their respect because I wasn't really a big IGL, right? So I had to earn my spot. I came into FaZe in beginning with that lineup. I immediately had a lot of respect, and I felt like it was given to me, like with the QC, my Elo, because they really wanted an IGL that could try to help this team go into playoff back then. Making this team, I felt like, okay, there's 2 ways this is gonna go, right? It's gonna go to shit from the first few months, and this is gonna go really bad, or I have an option to play into the strengths of my players. I knew I will not be able for them to play exactly the game I want, exactly how I want and how I see the game. But if I can get everyone to understand their role and see they can get impact, but it also benefit the whole team the way they play, right? So in some ways it was hard to talk with the team. It's very hard for me in any given situation to tell any player they're doing mistakes, because everybody in that team, either they will be reflective or they'll be defensive, right? Like, if you're the best player, I know many of the times I rather want all of my Star Guardian in a situation than me, because I know they're the best in that specific role. So yeah, I had to change my calling style, getting those players, but also think that made that team special, because I think we saw after what happened, like the pieces hard to keep together. I think Rain fell off from the way he played under me, and sometimes that's just gonna happen, because it's hard to say what structure I brought to that team, but I brought something that kept the players very happy, and that's what I'm trying to do. But also, I learned after that I have to take care of myself. I can't always go on compromises and accept everything. But in my life, there's always a balance. I try to be a good guy, but sometimes, and that I learned after the first phase variation, I have to say my mind sometimes when I think like we are playing a little bit bullshit here. So, but it is balance, and I respect the players I play with because they have so much credibility, and I trust them so much because they are always the best players in the world, I feel like. And yeah, so yeah, I think that changed me a lot as a person, that FaZe team, but it also gave me a lot of motivation to believe in myself after.
Right, obviously, I won't say you did nothing wrong. Like, I'm sure everyone in their own way played parts in some of the losses and certain maps of some one person's problem or certain rounds or something. And obviously, like you say, if you have that lineup of talent, I mean, the expectation should be win everything. I mean, some of these opponents aren't even always the number 2 team. It's like sometimes underdogs. But here's the question I have is, if they in the team as the big egos thought like, right, it's his fault, essentially, if we get rid of him and we bring someone else in, it'll work. As you're kind of pointing out, I mean, it didn't. Like, one thing I think is very lost, because I knew Janko, who was the coach later on, is, by the way, they absolutely, anytime they wanted, could have gone and gotten someone like MSL. But here's the thing, and this is what really taught me how pro players and big stars see the game differently from the IGL, is they thought like MSL wasn't good enough for them, because they were like, well, you know, he's not as big, he's not big. In fact, he's not even as good as karrigan. But then, if you look at who they did go and get, they just got like old great players. Like they got Neo in, and it's like, what? Like, and then they got like a Dren in, and it's like, what's going on here? But that's how, this the problem there, if you're a fan, is they still looked at those guys like they're legends. Or it's why Fallen's in Furia now, because they look at him like, holy shit, it's Fallen. Like, I remember when he was the best. Like, to me, in a way, didn't that kind of vindicate that, like, first of all, maybe at that time, maybe no one could have actually pioneered this team. It was a brand new concept. And then secondly, stars definitely see the game a bit different than the rest of us, right? Like, they're not the guys. They're not like coaches.
No, I mean, there's a reason why they're star players, right? They have I think every star player in every team has a specific game sense and seeing something that IGL won't see because the talent they have for the game, right? Like, I think I always said that I think NiKo has insane amount of game sense I haven't seen. Like, he understands the rounds, the timings and everything. And you see that in different players, obviously. But that's why I gave a lot of room to him, because I knew if I gave a lot of room, he is also going to win games for us, which he did so many times. And the same with Guardian, right? But I think the funny thing was that Exist got asked after he stand in for us, and he wasn't sure. I think he could do a better job than what I did, because he played now under the team, and it's strange to say it's not ego. It's just rough conditions, because it's something. If you haven't played international team back then, this was the team to win. We had to win, and I think that mentality can be very scary for every IGL that comes into a team, right? Yeah, you like pressure and you like everything, but back then it wasn't healthy as it is today. You have to understand, as a team, there is a long curve in front of you, losses and wins, but we expected to win very fast, and we also did that, right? I think that was maybe also the main concerns. We won the second tournament we played together. First tournament we bombed out of group stage, sat together, talk as a team, and next tournament we're winning 2 in a row, right? And then there's no way going back. You don't have these learning curve as a team. You just expect to win from that point on. So I don't know what the question was actually.
It was basically about like the fact that did you feel validated in some ways, that it's not like they brought in someone else. Like, here's the difference. At least people can try and build that story that like Glaive was the reason why they won all that. They can't say that about FaZe. Like, actually, they never were as good when they brought all these other guys in.
No, I obviously also think they tried different players. They tried to get, in my head, good names that could maybe fit the team or whatever. But obviously they didn't, and they tried something else, and obviously they in 6 months it was a shit show in that team, right? And then I think they removed Guardian, and then they rebuilt the team with just saying it was not maybe only me the problem, but there was more problems in the team, and sometimes you don't see their problem. Maybe there's multiple problems, but the one you are all focused on is maybe in the wrong basket or the wrong place, you know. And I think that's what happens in every team, right? If there's not someone there in control of saying how it needs to be done. And at that point, obviously, Robin was also stepping down already in the background. A lot of stuff happened there. So I was kind of lone captain on the ship. And it's hard sometimes when you're lone captain, you know, like there's no one to go to, and you can feel the mood in the team is turning a bit. And that's the thing about players. And that still happens to this day, that they're good at talking behind the backs and to each other. And I think it's very important to have a healthy team where you can sit down and talk face to face and explain the situation, because I think that's where you learn the most. And obviously back then we weren't mature enough to talk to each other, because a lot of big names, right? How will he handle it when you're saying stuff? So yeah, I mean, it was rough to see that they couldn't manage to win, because obviously that also gave me some blood on my teeth to show the world that, okay, I wasn't the only problem. Yeah, I wasn't doing the best job in the end of FaZe, but people have to realize playing with a stand-in for 4 months is no easy task as an IGL, and trying to keep your philosophy in team when you're not really practicing with a permanent fifth, right? So I think I lost a lot of energy in that period, and back then there was nowhere you could talk about a mental drainness or like getting a little demotivated. It was like next tournament, and now it's easy to talk to and tell the team, okay, I'm a little mental drained. I'm not gonna have that much energy for this tournament or next week in practice, but I'm doing my best to stay focused and come back to a high energy level. But back then you couldn't really say that stuff. But people understand that it is hard to play on a competitive level 24/7. You have to have some off days.
Right, obviously NiKo was such a brilliant player. This is the one that like people perceive as like these are the two people who are at odds. I'll phrase it like this. There's two ways to say it. One, I won't say NiKo had karrigan kicked. It's just that if I was writing the Hollywood script of this story, I'd get my pen, and that is definitely how I would write it. And then two, obviously he never really came in a room like, you're fired, get out, everyone is kicked. Like, it was never like that. I just mean more like, I think he wanted you kicked. You got kicked. I think he was happy about that. And what I'll say is this. I do remember a few years later, I think it was when we went online, where he did that like betting podcast thing where it was like overrated, underrated. I think it's even after you'd had like the mouse period and got like that lineup up. He still said overrated when they said karrigan. Don't worry, by the way, I was the next day. We said I'm overrated too, so fair play, right? But when he said that did sort of give away the game, NiKo, that like, even if you didn't have him fired, you sort of did think he needed to go. But here's the way I'm going to phrase it. It's a very fair way to ask this question, right? The reason I've always found that storyline so fascinating, but also so frustrating is, I think both players are mega. Like, I thought you were a really good in-game leader. You had a few flaws. I think NiKo was one of the best players even back then. He's amazing now, has his own idiosyncrasy, his own ways of working, some flaws, some strength. And I always just thought, if you're going to have international teams, he's played in international teams his whole career, you've been IGLing them, how can these two not get along? How can they not win? So basically, here's what I would ask. Obviously, he didn't have 2023 karrigan back then, and he wasn't 2023 NiKo. So what do you think was the issue back then? Like, could you have coexisted? Is it like you said earlier, if you won Boston or Katowice, does that somehow like forge the trust or something?
I think we could have stick together. I think there maybe also have been a possibility that we could have played together in later point. I mean, it is what it is, right? We are still good friends. But if I ever go to play to NiKo, I will have a deep talk about him and with him about everything, like get everything sorted out. But I'm really good friends with him. I'm talking to him actually a lot because I don't hold grudges. Like I said, I wasn't perfect in the end, right? I could see myself. I wasn't giving it my all. I was very tired of the whole stand-in thing, and then Olof came back, and it didn't feel natural, and the pressure was rising, and we were not able to handle as a team. And NiKo was never ever the lone factor for me getting benched. I mean, if I really did so good as an IGL, I think some of the players would have stepped in and said, no, it's something else we need to fix, But sometimes, like it's different views of how a problem created. And for me, I obviously also saw that Guardian got removed 6 months later after me, and I think if they would have made a change back then with let's say me and Guardian, that would have given them more fresh blood in that team, because it got so bad in the end that it was shots left and right to everyone in the team, like he's not playing enough, he's not giving it all, he doesn't seem motivated when he's playing, like suddenly everything in the team went left and right, and there was no one to kind of take that decision. We need to sit down and talk out as a team, and I think that's the biggest regret I have, that I didn't realize back then, okay, this is getting out of hand in the way we're talking to each other, the way we're acting. So yeah, I think it was, you have to be honest, I think it was justified back then because of how I reacted, but also there was a specific situation where I took over the IGL for a tournament again after the major, and it just made me very sad. I didn't want to play because of the way I could feel the pressure in the team when I was doing a call. It was not fun, and I really had a bad time, and I really thought like it doesn't make sense for me to at any time call here right now, and I knew that my time was not counted, like if we had to get back on track, we had to have a team talk, and that team talk never came into the season, so I knew I was out in that sense. So, but in the back room, there was maybe some transfers that would have happened, and I would have stayed in FaZe and rebuilt FaZe, but that didn't happen, and then obviously something else had to happen in the team, and obviously it's sad, but I had a great time with the guys, and I'm still really good friends with all of them because it was nothing personal, but something had to happen, and I just wish that we would have had a talk as a team to really give it a chance, and instead of having like own small comments, but really had a team talk and talk about the frustrations, because 2018 was a really frustrating year with Olof in and Olof out, not winning the major, me not calling during the next major. It was a rough time for my mind, and I'm really happy I went to mouz. That was the perfect thing for me and what I needed in my life to have a fun time playing. You know, like there's always gonna be periods where Counter-Strike isn't fun. That's part of the job. I want to say part of the passion. But 11 months out of the 12 months, you have to enjoy waking up and playing, and that's where I'm right now in my age as well. If I don't enjoy playing for a whole month, then I'm quitting. You know, like if I don't enjoy playing and competing, then it was over. But back then, I didn't know how to handle the situation because we all took something personal from the small comments that were made to everyone.
Right, if people make it like it was a rivalry, like NiKo versus karrigan, after like who was right, who was wrong, who did it, which obviously, look, the players don't see it that way, but this is what we do in the media business, right? Obviously, I was somewhat team karrigan. I wanted you to sort of prove him wrong, right? So I will say, when you won the major and you did it in FaZe Clan, when he's not in FaZe Clan anymore, after you chose to lead to GT, that in a way I thought initially like, oh, that's hilarious. Like I even low key wanted you to like flame him and be like, you know, what up now or something. But here's the saddest thing of all, karrigan, is when I think of like how that Stockholm major went for him, where he was fucking unbelievable, but just Na'Vi was there. Basically, he could have won that tournament against anyone else. And then I look at like the rest of his career. It's not funny anymore. It's actually like a tragedy now. Like obviously there aren't going to be any more CSGO majors. Like it's actually kind of insane. You think how good he was for that many years as world class, right? It's actually a tragedy the guy never won a major, right? He was definitely good enough. That goes without saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I hope he wouldn't want to see us too, as long as we're not in the final, obviously. But I think it's sad because I think he has such a gift for the game, such a talent. And also, knowing NiKo from 5 years ago to where he is now, he's way more mature in the way he sees the game, with the way he sees the life. You have to still think he was a young prodigy, young NiKo when I played with him, right? And now when you're like, I think he's 25 or something, you know, like you're starting to have a view how to be professional, how to think, how to talk to teammates, how to act, you know. And I think he is such a complete player now. And I think back then he was a very raw diamond in that sense that he had an insane X factor. And now I think he understands that he needs to be more than that, and he needs to be a good role model to his teammates as well. I think that's what maybe lacked in FaZe to everyone to be a good role model and trying to help everyone to improve, you know. So I think it's really sad, but it is how it is. And when I was in mouz, I even told myself I might not never win a major, but that's fine. Then I have to win everything else, you know. Like you can't only be about majors and deciding if I'm a great IGL or not. But if I win everything else, then you can say, okay, something happened during majors, but when it was not, he could win everything, right? So I think NiKo finally got that Katowice win. He has been in the final also 3 times, I think, or 4 times now. So I'm happy for him. He at least got that one. But it is what it is. You have to look at trophy room, but you also have to see a player that actually matured over time. And I think we have all seen NiKo mature as a player, but also as a person.
Right, if we talk about that mousesports period, I feel like people do that silly thing, especially obviously if they weren't there, I get it. They look on like a Wikipedia and they see the names and they do that thing where like they talk about like what the players were at the end of the team after you've had all your effect on them. And they make it sound like that was like some top team. Like, I don't think people get it. You go look at that lineup and it's like, obviously you didn't get the mousesports from before with Sonny and Oscar and those guys who were already top players. The one you got had Woxic, who if people don't remember was like a talent, but all he done is playing like Hellraisers, and he used to basically just be like, it looked quite frankly like he just did whatever he wanted. I'm not even sure they had structure on him then. And also, by the way, if people don't know, a very spicy personality. Like, can be a super sick player, but he really is the guy. He almost is like a rock and roll guy. He is the guy who'll just be sort of like doesn't give a fuck in a group stage game or online match, but you can put him in the big match, yeah, he might go ham. Then you add obviously Rops, but people are going to think we're talking about Rops now. Like, this is baby Rops. This is when he's only been in the game, like, you know, like 1 or 2 years. He's even come up with the others when they're the stars. He's developing into maybe like an NiKo type player, but he's still on the way. And then I always think the most unfair one's Frozen, mate. Frozen was 16 years old, guys, playing in his first like team speaking English. Like, he isn't the Frozen now in mouz that we all know is really good and probably could be in a better team. Like, if you look back now, yeah, it looks mega, this lineup. But when you got it, it actually makes sense that the team wasn't immediately good and it took a while to fight. Because even the players themselves weren't the players they are now, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, the funny story, when I got off of a mouz, I expected Oscar, Sonny, Flusher, and Robs. You know, I was happy, and then he called me only Rob staying. I'm like, then I found out the guys didn't want to have me as an IGL. I was like, fair enough. Robs is giving me a chance. I'll take that one. But I always felt like Robs was a very special guy when I played against him. He was very patient, very good at playing specific roles on the maps, and I just enjoyed seeing him playing because he was different type of player. Nobody ever played like Robs in that point, but now a lot of people playing like Robs to kind of mimic the way he's doing and way he's playing. So yeah, when I came into lineup, obviously there was some roles I thought on top of my head. Obviously reading some interviews, talking with the guys, watching some demos. So I thought Chris J would be a great secondary caller. Froze was a young guy. Let's do an entry frag and roll together with me. It's gonna be a good combo. Voxic, I knew he had huge talent. Like, you could see on the name, he just needed someone to guide him and make sure he feels he has freedom, but still has to understand what needs to be done for the team, right? So coming into the team, the first 3-4 months, I'm like, okay, I've given these roles 7 months now, and it hasn't been more than top 10 placements and maybe top 6, top 4 big tournaments. So I thought to myself, time to change Frozen into a more lurky role, like a secondary lurk, and having Chris J running with me. And then suddenly the team clicked. I think that's because Frozen was so young. I didn't know what to expect. You know, he still grew a lot the first few months and understood. And I had some talks with him, and to this day, he's still saying that talk we had on a restaurant where gave him his life advice of what I've learned in my teams, and he's now passing it on to mousesports. It's great to hear that some of the words I said back then is brained into him. So I'm super happy the way he has developed, and it was very hard to leave him behind in mouz, obviously, because he's a great and underrated talent in my eyes. Like, he should be on a big top 5 team. So yeah, that team was very unique opportunity to play and create a new international powerhouse, and it turned out to be pretty good end of the year with a lot of wins, and especially the Pro League ones winning I think first Pro League for mousesports ever, so doing some history there. But yeah, like you said, Voxic was a little feisty person, and obviously it is hard to keep players down, especially when they're suddenly a top 15 player in the world. But here's a great guy. I could have talked to him, but obviously it didn't work out in the end. And now we were back to finding solution, getting Boom as the stand-in. And again, I felt in a situation where I couldn't decide what was best for the lineup. And that's why I went back to FaZe and got the opportunity to build on some of the leftovers from last FaZe.
The funny thing I always thought as well is, because one thing I love to do, it's why I actually am the historian. I actually am the nerd where I don't just like to even look at like what did happen. I like to do like what it's called the counterfactual. I like to think, what if this had happened? What if this person stayed? What if this person had gone? You know, I like to do like the alternate reality. And what I've always thought is so brutal is like, look, I'm sure Navi, who'd won that Katowice, also think this is like, what if we didn't go online? What if there'd been that spring major? Because look, yeah, Navi was killing everyone. Great. They'd have had a very good chance. You still had like FNATIC was very good. You know, still a lot of good teams, but your team was a real dark horse. Like, this could have been an interesting chance to sort of have a no pressure chance to win a major, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think we even beat Navi in this Ice Challenge tournament right before Katowice, but did manage to go to Katowice playoff because we had the last game, and between map 2 and map 3, they're talking on broadcast that no crowd at Katowice, and that hurt me, and I was not ready to hear that during my game, and I think I wasn't mentally in it, and then we lost. So, and back then I think we were ranked 2 on Hell TV and winning like 4 or 5 events, and you winning in a stand-in and coach. So yeah, we were on a roll, But online it was hard to replicate. I think the first online tournament we lost in the final, so we did do good in the first few months online, but it was a very big test for my mental state. Like it was so hard for me to go back to. It was like 1.6, sitting here home playing 24/7, and for the young guys, it was a perfect scenario to get more experience, and they showed up big time. And we saw after COVID how big shuffle all my big competitors, MBK and Get Right, and all these players just dropped out as flies during COVID. And I was like, I'm praying to God, let me survive and let me survive until Cologne. Yes. And we will see if I lost my edge on LAN. And then we made top 4 with that Olaf roster, and I was just like, okay, I still got something that works on LAN and not only online.
That was something I wanted to ask about, because obviously, like, what made that tournament great is, if people remember, in the 2 semis, there was Glaive, but obviously he didn't have Device in his team, and he made semis as well. And then you made the other one with this phase like before Ops. So like these are like underpowered lineups in theory, but what it proved basically was like world-class IGLing is not a thing about online games where you play a different game every day, different opponent, because I know players understand the concept that like it plays different on the internet, but I feel like your type of calling especially, it works. I mean, people see it now in FaZe. The time it works the absolute best is the really high pressure LAN game in a stadium where the other players on the other team all have to think about, do I do the rotation now? Do I gamble? Do I stay? That's when you can really sort of toy with people, right? I mean, people remember at the time, online Gambit was impossible. No one could fuck with them. I actually understand why they had the reputation and egos they did, but in this particular game, even though it was a mega game, I remember you playing at this Cologne, like, this was like a fucking masterclass. Like you were toying with them. You could see at times they didn't realize, like, holy shit, is this LAN compared to online?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about that tournament was we played Gambit in lower bracket and Heroic in lower bracket, and they were the 2 big teams online. And obviously, I'm not calling them online or anything, but if you have a coach who chips in every minute online, nobody's going to stop you, right? It was every coach could be talking online. So a lot of IGLs had help without taking a tactical pause or anything. But also, obviously, I think the pressure is where I learned the most, like I didn't learn losing a major at home. I learned playing on the biggest stage, understanding I can not hesitate with my call. I cannot think about my call. It has to just come naturally, and I just have to do it. But online, I was obviously in some of the rounds, I like to throw a chaos of curveball. It just works better on LAN because the rotation of the enemies are 2 seconds faster on LAN than online, And I think it just always happens like that. We're human beings. You're told not to rotate, and anyway you rotate because it might be a fake, but you want to be there on time because there's a lot of information and people are screaming the information. But online people are sitting and chilling and drinking stuff, like they're just big chilling and just playing their own game and not thinking. But on LAN, even if it's big stage on LAN, it means something more. And just that it means something more is where I felt like I could get those last 5% to call even better than the enemies, right? So it was a great opportunity for me to know I still just had to live through COVID. I had to fight and I had to play a lot, and I just had to make sure I survived. And thank God I did, because there was big changes during COVID, and there was news every month about a big player stepping down for the talent or academy players, which were shooting so hard, and they still do. Like we see a lot of young players in teams now, but that was the generation shift, and that was the perfect timing for the new players to come up.
When I look at the big teams you're in, like TSM, like FaZe, where like you had success, but you didn't exceed the expectations, that's maybe even why the players sort of turned on you. And then I look at the teams where it's the other way around, like mousesports, obviously this FaZe Clan, where you've exceeded expectations, you've gone to the highest heights, you've won the championships. I feel like a lesson I've learned, I want to get your take on it, is it's actually also like what you said earlier about when you come into TSM, I mean, their whole thing then is like, look, we're actually already really good players, we're actually already basically good enough to win, like your job is just get us to win. Okay, and then when you come into FaZe Clan, it's like we have to win everything. No, not even just like all of it. Like that's like a different that buy-in there isn't buy-in, karrigan. It's essentially like if you win everything, you stay. If we lose, you kicked. These teams, mouz, and especially even this FaZe, to me, it's like, just like you said about when you came to the original phase, and Kiyashima and Alu, they're like, dude, we needed an IGL this whole time. Like, come on, let me be a good player again. Like, put me in position. I feel like not only in mouz, because they were younger players, but this FaZe Clan team, yeah, now everyone looks again, same thing at Brokey and Twists and Robs, and they go, oh, these are the best players in the world. They were all top 20 at the bottom of the top 20 the year before, guys. You can go look this up. They were like in 18, 17, and 20 or something on that list. They weren't top 5 like they were the year after. So to me, it's like, I got the vibe of like, these are players who understood like what you're bringing to the game. And it isn't about we have to win every tournament. It's like, right, this guy's, we're going to collectively get to a higher level. It feels like the buy-in's different, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, just knowing, I had to talk with Trist, obviously, he wanted to come in playing even mouz if I stayed in mouz, right? And then he wanted to come to FaZe if I was saying I was going there, you know? So already I had a player there. I knew Rain wanted to play so bad with me. We had talked already doing, maybe he would be able to come to mouz, you know? I was looking into that option at any point, because I think Rain has been always the best teammate I've ever had. There's no issues with him. He's always consistent with what he does. He does everything for the team, but holy moly, he can win a tournament for you if he's feeling it, you know? But he will do mistakes. He will do some over peaks, but when there's one guy and the chips are down, I want Rain to peak, you know, like, because I know he's not overthinking it, he's not doing anything, he just goes with the natural feeling. And sometimes with these younger players, they might think about, if you die, what happens, or can the team still win? But coming into the team, I could see a renewal of Rain, because he knew, even if he died, he knew that he had 3 young guns. He had seen so much in practice already, how they can clutch. So that just gave him that confidence back that he had with the old FaZe Clan, where he could just go ham. And if not, they will clean up after us, you know? Like, I think I already knew when this team came together that when we got Rubs and then Twist always went, that everybody believes in the way I see the game, believes how we work as a team, and everybody's trying to buy into that culture. And some of them had worked with me. They know what to expect of me. So if I'm not doing good in 2 weeks of practice, when I come to LAN, I'll always be there 100% and work everything to us to get the win. So I think it gives me a lot of confidence, and also makes me a greater caller, that I don't have to think afterwards, did I do the right or wrong call? I did the call that I believe was right, and I always believed they believe. When I say we do A rush without any nades, they're like, yeah, let's go. You know, I think I asked the question against Ends, should we do A rush here? I think the wording was, I have a big call here now. Either it's yes or no, boys. It's A rush without smokes. And Rain goes, hell yeah. You know, and rush A, and there was no one A, you know, but I had that strange feeling it would be the right call to do. But just having that loyal team behind you just makes it way easier to not ask that question sometimes, just do the call, you know, and just go with the feeling. And if not, I know with this team we can talk about it after. And I think for me has been talking to FaZe, and also said, like, if the team don't want me, I don't want to be here. If anyone don't trust what I'm doing in the team, I'd rather just leave the team and let someone else take over. I'm at this point in my career, if I have to earn the trust now from the team, it's very hard, you know. So I'm just super happy to be with the guys, and I just feel like every day they're trusting me and trusting the process, and I'm proud to be in part of their prime, you know, that this is their prime as players. They're 22, they have a lot of experience now, and yeah, I'm just happy I'm still the captain of the team, because it is not easy always to win, and the expectations are high with the team now. But we're working towards doing our best, and as long as we go deep in tournaments, I know on some days we will win, some days we will lose.
Right, obviously, you alluded to it earlier. You actually are one of the best IGLs, bizarrely, at working with standings. Like, you actually won tournaments in the old phase with different players, different standings. Sometimes players, by the way, like their career ended or they never did anything after that. But this one in this Katowice was beyond ridiculous, because people forget this detail. They always tell the story that, like, JKS replaced Rain. That's half the story. He replaced Rain initially, then Rops had to be, like, of course, go over or whatever, had to be in the room. So then he replaced Rops. So it's like, actually, he basically worked with like 3 different lineups of players or something ridiculous and you won the tournament. Like, that has to be, what was this one like? This sounds like something out of a movie, mate.
It was crazy. I remember when we made it to playoff, I was telling myself, this is a story for my kids. They have no idea how it is to be in this team. So basically, we arrived to boot camp in Poland. So that was in Warsaw. And on first day, Rob's saying, I'm feeling a little sick. So he takes a COVID test in the morning. That was first time the team saw each other. We didn't even start practicing, and then he has COVID. And we're just sitting there 5 days until Katowice start. Can we somehow get him on a taxi drive to the hotel where we're playing and isolate him? And that was not a possibility because now he was isolated 10 days in a hotel room in Warsaw, not even in Katowice. So, yeah, going into the standard, and obviously Russ brought up JKS and about also other names, and then we were happy because I think JKS would be a good fit for the way Robs was playing.
Yes.
But the problem was that he was on a contract, right? And we had only 3-4 days to figure out this thing, and we managed to do it. So coming to the tournament, the roles was pretty simple on the T side, I think it was. I can't remember. But I just told him, play your game. We will figure it out. Keep it simple. I'm not going to show you lineups. And he was like, you don't want me to know innates? No. Let's just keep it simple. Play good, trade good, and play how you want. If you want to go through a smoke, go through a smoke. Just say you do it so I can react as a caller, you know? So I gave him this freedom to try to play his game. He started watching Rob's demos and stuff like that. And you cannot just fit into the way we are playing as a team. I have to understand him, and it clicked really fast, obviously. And we had some rough games in beginning, but we managed to qualify. And then I think the last day of group stage, we played Navi to go to semis or quarters. Robs is back, but now Brookie and Rain is in isolation in the hotel. So we are playing free from
Okay.
And the problem was that obviously they can only do that in group stage. So if it's playoff, they cannot play from isolation. So Brokey was clear, but Rain was not. And we knew that it would take 5-6 days. So he tested positive Sunday. And every day he had to test at 3 p.m. to be able to come to practice. So the funny story, we practiced with Rain that whole week between the groups and the playoff because we believed he would come back. So every day at 3 p.m. At the day we play, he's getting tested, and it's positive. So we brought JKS into the shuttle. Everyone was packed.
Okay.
He was packed in the room. He just unpacked and was playing retake and watching game. But I think something clicked in our heads. I think there was so lot of frustration before the Katowice, but then when we were there, it's just day by day. We don't know who we're playing with, but the only thing we can is trying to stay positive and have fun. And I think Robin had such a huge impact in how we view this situation. There's like life gave us this situation. We have to do the best out of the situation. It is what it is. We cannot change it. It's the rules of the tournament. Yeah, we're unlucky, but so can other teams also be, you know? So I think Robin created this bubble of the team and just having fun together and take this as a fun tournament, basically. I know it's very easy to say, but the pressure was off. And what happened to my calling was that I had to keep it simple and basic. So a lot of mid-round calling, a lot of micromanaging, and I can do that. And I know I can do it good, but that's not how we normally play. But in this tournament, I had to make sure that if the communication was not there, I had to micromanage a lot more. But when we started feeling it, everybody's taking different duels, reacting off each other, and playing good CS. But yeah, oh man. And I feel so bad because on the final day when Rain tested, the test said inconclusive.
Oh, they count that still as positive,
negative.
essentially, right? I'm guessing.
So no, it became the value was exactly on what it's supposed to be under to be negative.
Right.
But they could not let him pass in because it's inconclusive. So basically he was fine to leave the next day, and I felt so bad for him. And we just played our game, and we knew G2 is gonna be tough. There's some maps that won't work because now JK is playing Rain roles. And yeah, it was just fantastic to see how JK just took it, you know. He just watches our practice like a coach, but then suddenly he was playing the games, and I think he just enjoyed it. It was a fun experience for him, and I think it's the first time I've seen Justin smile so much, and he had a lot of fun, and I think he just enjoyed that moment, and I think we all did. And sometimes it's as simple as that, enjoying that you are in a quarterfinal, and then obviously we're playing Gambit and Heroic again, and they're playing really good, but winning Katowice playoff without losing a map against Gambit, Heroic, G2, where the stand is something I'll never forget, you know? It was very draining tournament as well, because every day I didn't know what to expect, because basically what happened was that I had the veto on my mind with Rain. Then it was JKS, the veto had to go different way. So the way of anti-threading was very strange. I just knew like we had to choose based off who we were playing with, because I could not choose Ancient with JKS, because in theory we had 3 A players in our team, Robs,
Right.
me, and JKS, and I just started playing B when Robs joined, so there will be 3 A players in Ancient, and 2 of them is playing B, you know, so that was a map we had to avoid. So yeah, it was fun, but also very stressful, but holy, it was an incredible experience to lift a trophy out of nowhere.
As you sort of alluded to earlier about NiKo, when NiKo was in this last Katowice final and he won it, all the stats before were like, he's been like 4 of these before, he never won them before. Like, you had the same thing at this one, I remember, because they were like, look at all the past ones he was in, and he obviously didn't win with FaZe Clan. Right, to win the Katowice, like you said earlier, it's not a major, but the joke is, that's why I call them the prestige tournaments now. The majors plus Katowice and Cologne's what everyone wants to win. That's what everyone at the end of the career wants on the resume. The question's going to be, if you aside from majors, how many Cologne's and Katowices did you win? So even though it was under crazy circumstances, it had to be very satisfying to finally win.
Oh, I had so many bad moments in I think the first Katowice final was acceptable. I think we lost to Astralis with just having playing 1 week with NiKo, but like I said, last time I was the final of Katowice, that's where I felt FaZe died, you know, that old lineup where we lost it to FNATIC. So being there and playing against NiKo, and I think the funny thing that Robin said when we walked onto the stage and stood up, she said, good, we're on the good side, Finn. What do you mean? The last 2 times we sit on the left side, we lost the final, now we sit on the right side. So I just knew, okay, he believes, I believe now as well, because NiKo was sitting on the left side for 3 times in the final, and then he lost from that side. So that's the small stories and the small things that we had the comments about to each other, you know, just believe, and it was unbelievable. But yeah, winning Katowice, and especially the crowd gave me such a huge welcome and just really cheered me on. It was one of those moments where, you know, tears just, you know, come up, because I think so many times now in Katowice I walk up the stairs, there's a name for everyone who wins, and the stairs gets higher every year. Okay. And I'm always walking there and I see 2017, 2018, and right. I will like, and then it says in the end, if you win this year, your name will be here.
Oh,
you know,
right.
something like that.
That's cool.
But that's super cool when you walk up, and that's only in Katowice. And now I'm just hoping to go back there to play in playoff and seeing that FaZe Clan won in 2022. You know, just to have that, because that's a huge, cool thing and a small thing that people don't care about, but for players, putting your name on some set of stairs or trophy is just something that's forever legendary, forever in the game, right?
I've been pleasantly surprised during the time I've had my Patreon and my Patreon community, the Skrilluminati, by both the financial support they've provided and the moral support. And so this video was kindly supported and made possible by Starlust, Theo Buenzelli, Ahmed Haju, Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Toucan, Jensen Go, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Bot Pounder 420, Yerka 86, Tosh, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in one of those AMAs where I tend to go pretty in depth? Sometimes they even spin out into their own videos. Do you want teasers to find out who the upcoming guests are for the myriad of interviews that I do across esports? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest? We have a channel on my Discord where you can do that if you're at the right tier. And of course, you could potentially take part in one of those lengthy esports discussions with me about whatever is on your mind in the scene. Well, if any of those perks sound tantalizing, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.